My father's handwriting was small and careful, the letters pressed hard into the page like he was afraid they'd float away if he didn't pin them down. I noticed that about it again when I found the letter. When I finally found it, folded once inside a waxed survey envelope, tucked beneath the sphere, in the locked cabinet at the back of his shed. 2 weeks after the funeral, a Tuesday. I'd come out to sort his things because somebody had to, and my mother couldn't make herself do it. And I was 16, and apparently that made me the right person for the job. The shed smelled like him. Graphite dust and machine oil, and the particular dry heat of southern New Mexico scrubland baking through the tin roof. His survey maps were still pinned to the corkboard in their careful rows. His coffee thermos sat on the workbench where he'd left it, the morning he drove to the site and didn't come back. I hadn't touched any of it. I'd just been moving around the edges of the room for an hour, pretending to organize, not organizing anything, because every time I picked something up, I had to put it down again. The locked cabinet was the last thing. He'd always kept it locked. I was 12 the first time I asked him why, and he said there was sensitive equipment inside, survey instruments that were calibrated to specific tolerances and couldn't be disturbed. I believed him the way you believe your father when you're 12, and he says a thing with that particular calm weight in his voice. By 14, I'd stopped asking. The cabinet became one of the room's permanent facts, like the corkboard and the thermos, like the low hum the overhead light made in summer heat. His key ring was on the workbench hook. I found the small flat key on the third try. The cabinet held 2 wire shelving tiers. The top one, calibration tools in labeled foam cutouts, a transit scope he'd never sent in for repair, a logbook dated 11 years back. The object was roughly the size of a large grapefruit, maybe a little heavier. 6-sided, pentagon faces meeting in smooth edges. No seam you could find with your thumbnail. The surface was matte. Not stone, not metal, not quite either. The color of old concrete in winter light. When I was 9 and had crept into the shed while he was on a call inside the house, he'd found me holding it and taken it from my hands very gently, the way you'd take something from a child near a road. He hadn't been angry. He'd just said, "Not yet, Marin," and put it back, and locked the cabinet, and I'd never mentioned it again. I picked it up. It was warm. Not warm from sitting in a cabinet in a hot shed. Warm the way a living thing is warm. It sat in my palms, and the warmth came up through my fingers and into my wrists, and I stood there in the particular stillness of a person who has touched something that is touching them back. I don't know why I didn't drop it. 16-year-olds drop things. I just stood there and held it, and let the warmth move up my arms. And after a moment, I reached for the waxed envelope with one hand, tipping the sphere against my chest, and I opened it. Small and careful and pressed hard. Marin, if you're reading this, you found it yourself, which means I didn't get to be the one to hand it to you. I'm sorry for that. I'd planned on a conversation, the kind fathers have with their daughters when the time is right and the words are ready. I kept waiting for the right time. I should have known there isn't one. The sphere is called, in the best translation I was ever given, a thread anchor. It is part of a survey network built 9,000 years ago by a civilization that no longer exists in any form we'd recognize. The network is still active. The anchors are how the network identifies its custodians, the humans who agreed, at some point in our very long history, to watch over the relay stations and keep the thread intact. Her mother before her. I carried it for 22 years. And nothing happened, because I was never the anchor's custodian. I was only the keeper between custodians. The sphere knows the difference. It has always known. I brought specialists in 3 times over the years. Colleagues, a materials scientist, once a man from a research institute who spent 4 hours with it and declared it inert. They were right. For them, it was. The sphere is not inert. It is patient. There is a difference. Don't put it down. Don't be afraid. Whatever it says, and it will say something. She told me it always does. It is telling you the truth about yourself. The truth has been true your whole life. You're only hearing it now. I love you. I'm sorry I won't be there. Take good care of the thread. Dad, I read it twice. The sphere was humming now. Not a sound. A feeling. The way you feel low frequencies in your sternum in the moment before you know you're hearing music. My hands were steady. I noticed that about them, distantly. That my hands were not shaking. The same way you notice a detail when the world has gone very still, and every small thing comes into focus with total, unasked-for clarity. She'd seen me come out from the kitchen window and followed. And now she stood in the door of my father's shed with her arms crossed over her chest, and her face doing the thing it had been doing for 2 weeks, trying to hold itself together by holding very still. She looked at the sphere in my hands. She looked at my face. She didn't say anything. The way spouses know things they've never been told directly, the way a life lived beside a person fills you up with the outline of their secrets, even if you never see the content. She'd married a keeper. She'd raised a custodian, without knowing that's what she was doing. She stood in the door and looked at me, and didn't say a word. The sphere spoke, not through air, through my sternum, through the bones of my hands, through whatever frequency the letter had tried to describe and failed. Because you cannot describe it. You can only stand in it and let it happen. 2 words. A title. A designation 9,000 years old and 3 seconds new. Landing in me like something that had been flying a very long time and finally found the place it was aimed at. Heir of the accord thread. That was all. The warmth didn't leave. It settled. and stays, and holds. And the sphere in my hands weighed exactly what it weighed before, and I was still 16, and still standing in my father's shed in the middle of a Tuesday, and everything was exactly the same, except that it wasn't. She looked at the sphere, and then at me, and then at the letter still open in my hand, and I watched her read my father in my face, whatever was there now that hadn't been there before, and her expression did something that wasn't grief exactly, something adjacent to it, the way relief and sorrow sometimes share a border, and you can't say where one ends. She said, "He told me you'd know when it was time." I looked down at the sphere, matte gray in the shed light, warm against my palms. Patient the way only something 9,000 years old can be patient, which is to say, completely, without urgency, without doubt, waiting being simply what it does. "What do I do now?" I said. She was quiet a moment. Then, he had a contact. A name in the back of his logbook. Top shelf. I looked at the logbook on the upper wire tier. I looked at the sphere. I didn't know what the network needed. I didn't know what a thread anchor custodian was supposed to do, or where the relay stations were, or what keeping the thread intact looked like for a 16-year-old girl in southern New Mexico with a dead father and a mother standing in the door of a tin shed. I didn't know any of it, but I was warm all the way through, and I did not put it down.